Alrighty, we are back and rolling rounds 7 through 10 in this video of my way too early best ball underdog fantasy, best ball mania, yada 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 yada. You know what it is. Check out the other three videos I got posted. Actually, this draft, as you can see, is kind of coming to an end pretty soon, so I should have all the full series of videos uploaded, as well as I'm going to be releasing daily matchup videos for the US Open. Hopefully win some money there betting on the US Open. Knew this was going to happen. Apologize. Cat wants to make a nice little view, but we hit that record button. We are not going to stop. We're going to roll through this one. So let's take a look here. We have rounds 7 through 10, so we have a decent amount to go through. As you can see, I'm pretty far in this draft and not do very well with keeping up with the videos like I wanted to. But let's jump on into it. So we saw Dalvin Cook, Kadarius Toney, We saw Kadarius Toney, Dalvin Cook go at the end of the sixth in the last video. I love the George Pickens pick at 7.1. We obviously saw what he was capable of doing. I think that he could absolutely break out. Deontay Johnson's not going to be the top guy there in Pittsburgh. They're going to need somebody to really step up, especially if Kenny Pickett's planning on taking that next step. I think he's going to be great for fantasy this year. If not great, he's going to be a stable wide receiver too, with high upside in my opinion. Cooks and Tyler Lockett, both these guys I do not mind. Brandon Cooks is actually a little sneaky young. I think he's only 28, so he could have actually a pretty good year in Dallas. Obviously, speed lasts until it goes away completely. So as we're seeing with Cooks, Tyreek Hill, some of these older, faster guys, as long as you keep that speed up and you don't lose the ability to catch the football, you're going to be productive. I know he had a bad year last year, but everyone outside of the running back for Houston had a bad year. So not going to hold that against him. He's been a good player other than that year. Tyler Lockett, I love this at the 7.3. I can't remember exactly what pick JSN had already gone, but I like Tyler Lockett over JSN again just for this year. I think JSN is going to be more of a disruptor in this offense for fantasy as opposed to a producer on his own. DeAndre Swift, Alexander Madison, obviously with the news we have now, getting a potential RB. I'm going to call him an RB2. I still think that there's 12 to 15 running backs you're for sure taking over Madison, but then he becomes a little bit, questionable. So potential RB, back end RB2 here in the seventh round is awesome. I also love Cam Akers for those same reasons. So again, both those guys, even DeAndre Swift, if you're down on DeAndre Swift after last year, he has a new system. He's going to be productive out of that backfield. He has a great offensive line, which I know he had in Detroit as well. But obviously, Detroit did not want him that much, or did not want to utilize him that much last year, and obviously got rid of him. So Deontay Johnson, let's see what this guy's team is looking like. So he went heavy with quarterback. Richardson wasn't picked yet. He only had one running back at this time and did not go Cam Akers. I would say that's a pretty bad miss, in my opinion. You're really hoping that these quarterbacks just go insane. And I don't know how I just changed that to my name. Let's go back here. So, I'm not taking Deontay Johnson at this point. You are stacked up on wide receivers. You got to go Cam Akers. You got to go someone like a James Conner. I think that's a terrible pick. Cam Akers, I talked about. Quentin Johnston, don't mind it. I think, again, he's very similar to JSN. He's going to be more of a disruptor. Hopefully, by the end of the year, he can kind of take over the number 2 spot in that offense. But, we see a lot of times when rookies go to heavy wide receiver rooms, they don't typically break out. Like we saw, Sky Moore last year for the Chiefs. He really never did anything for us. And the wide receivers that did break out, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, were an immediate need for a spark on their team. So I like to look at those guys. Even Jahan Dotson, when he was breaking out, the Washington Commanders needed that kind of spark. So that's why I kind of like some of those guys over Johnston for his first year. But he's capable. If you look at his highlight tape, he is absolutely capable of breaking out. And what are the odds of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen staying healthy for the entire year? Very low. So I do think he could be a factor. Gabe Davis, Rashad Bateman, both are being disrespected right now. I think both could have bounce back years. Right now we're looking at Gabe Davis potentially being the number 1 guy in Buffalo with Stephon Diggs being up in the air. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but I think his value at this point is pretty decent where you're getting him. Rashad Bateman, same thing. I mean, right now, we obviously got OBJ and Zay Flowers there as well as Mark Andrews. Everyone's kind of just pushing Rashad Bateman further and further down. I mean, there's a chance Rashad Bateman still is the best wide receiver on that team. So I understand absolutely snagging him. I went Jahan Dotson here. I think he's the clear wide receiver two for Washington now. I don't think Curtis Samuel is going to be as involved as he was in the middle of last year. Dotson had really proven that he can take over that role, and I think they'll continue that. I still think McLaurin's the clear one, but I think Dotson has, wide receiver 2, 3 potential. Low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 potential, especially with the way he was finding the end zone last year. Now, that's obviously not a sticky stat. We'll have to see if he can do that again. Darren Waller, don't mind him here at the 7-8 turn. Obviously, in best ball, tight ends do go a little bit earlier. So, I am not the highest on Darren Waller. We saw last year he has issues being with injury. Obviously, new situation, new team. They need wide receiver or just offensive pass catching options big time in New York. So he has a very high ceiling. It's just, are we ever going to see the Darren Waller from a few years ago again? I would bet that we're not. So that is why I'm just a little iffy on him. But I think where you're getting him in a best ball draft, that's a solid pick. Dak Prescott at quarterback. Was that his first quarterback? It was his first quarterback, so yeah, I don't mind Dak in that situation. I mean, you're looking at Dak, a Tua, Kirk Cousins. So this guy was really worried about stacking his lineup and was just going to kind of probably draft 2 to 3 quarterbacks towards the end. Grabbing Dak in that position, I 100% understand and respect that pick. I went with James Conner, and I was very up in the air on who to pick. I was between James Conner, Isaiah Pacheco, and Rashad White were the three that I was deciding between. And the fantasy footballers, shout out the fantasy footballers, completely changed my mind on James Conner. I kind of felt like I was a little bit out on him, but he is indeed going to be, a valuable fantasy asset. If you look at his last, I believe, 6 or 7 weeks last year after he returned, even those weeks without Kyler Murray, he was like a top 5 running back overall and didn't finish outside the top 20 in those 6 or 7 weeks. So he has a lot of potential. He has the opportunity there in Arizona. It's just, you're drafting a bad running back in a bad. I'm sorry, you're drafting a running back in a bad offense, which I always just find a little bit iffy. But in the 8th round, I mean that's an insane value for Connor, in my opinion. Njoku, I like Njoku. I think out of the tight ends that after those tight ends go off the board, Njoku's the clear next guy. I mean, you could even argue taking Njoku over Waller if you feel like Cleveland's offense can turn it around. Sutton, I don't have a lot to say about Sutton. I'm hoping this guy just needed some wide receivers. Yeah, I mean, he only had 3. He took Dave Davis. I just don't really know what to say about Sutton. They keep adding to that wide receiver room as well as just offensive weapons in general. And last year, him and Russ just were never on the same page. And I mean, as a guy who I traded for Cortland Sutton towards the beginning of last season because I thought Russ was going to be able to get it going, he was terrible for fantasy football. Honestly, just became a huge roster clog because you knew that there was potential there, but could not make it happen. I'm off of Cortland Sutton this year. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, maybe Dulcich at the end of a draft, not best ball, but just in general. I mean, those are probably the only 2 guys I'm looking for. And then maybe if, Javante falls somewhere, sorry, he's not there, it's over here. But if Javante falls somewhere super far in a draft, maybe I'd consider picking him up, but odds are you won't. Tua, again, quarterback's available. He's the best available quarterback in my opinion. I mean, I'm taking him over Kirk. I'm taking him over Anthony Richardson. I know some people probably are going to tell you to take Richardson. I understand that from a rushing perspective, but there's a good chance he has one of the worst passing years in NFL history, just based on his performance at Florida. So I like Tua there in the offense with the weapons he has. Should be amazing. Jameson Williams, let's hope he finally gets on the field consistently this year. Obviously had the injury last year. Now is a 6-game suspension. Let's see what he can do once he gets back. I think that obviously is why he is so far in this draft. James Cook is what it is. Don't have much to say about Buffalo right now. I know they're kind of in the Dalvin Cook sweepstakes, which would be cool to get both brothers on the same team. But there wasn't really that much out of James Cook last year that I was like, wow, this is going to be a guy of the future. I think he could be a steal here. Obviously, they did also add Damian Harris, so you got to factor that in. But I understand going James Cook. I think he has the higher upside out of that running back room. Zay Flowers, I'm very high on Zay Flowers. I think he could be the number one wide receiver in Baltimore this year. So, like I was saying, you want wide receivers with opportunity. I think Rashad Bateman, he has had injury issues in the past, and when he's on the field, he has been good, but I don't think he's ever looked like a dominant number one wide receiver. OBJ has looked like a dominant number one wide receiver, but I would put the odds of him lasting all season at close to zero. So I think Zay Flowers is one of those guys that there's a chance early on in the season he just gets opportunity that other rookie wide receivers are not going to get. I love him at this point in the draft. I was actually contemplating taking him over James Conner here, but I needed to wrap up another running back, and I could not wait for this kind of last, I would say, grouping of starting running backs to pass me. So I'm all about Zay Flowers. He's going to be a guy I'm hammering in a lot of drafts. Michael Thomas, if he comes back, this can be good. He was good for the weeks he was there, but I'm not going to draft Michael Thomas. Same thing with OBJ. How do you trust him to stay healthy? He's also, I think, already missing mandatory minicamp or something. I forgot the headline I saw, but I'm out on Michael Thomas. Someone else can draft him. Kirk Cousins is what it is. Is this? We actually stacked him with Jefferson. That is a little bit more interesting. But he got Justin Fields. So Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, you're wrapped up at the quarterback position through the first 8 rounds. Let's see if Pollard, Jacobs, love those two. Got A-Chain, Warren later. Got Jefferson. Got Burks, Lockett, Juju. We'll see what he does in New England, and then he also went Hawkinson. So see, this is what I mean. When you go Hawkinson early, you gotta put three tight ends on your team to feel comfortable. Don't necessarily love that, but one of these picks, like if you switch out Hawkinson and you just go Komet, another tight end later, and then you pick up Hill, you could have potentially put another good wide receiver on your team, another good running back. So I'm just a little skeptical on the Hawkinson pick, especially when you have to use a fourth rounder. But I do think that this guy's developing a really good team, and I like the Kirk Cousins pick in that situation. Elijah Moore, everything coming out about Elijah Moore has been super positive coming from Cleveland camp. Obviously, you have Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples Jones. So it's just a situation you're going to have to see how it plays out, but this could be a great pick here. Pacheco and Javonte Williams going back to back. Very surprising for me. I mean, Pacheco, the only thing you're worried about is if he does not get any kind of pass catching workload this year. Obviously, the Chiefs are bringing back McKinnon. So that's something that they're going to have to work on, but we'll see what happens there. I think that Pacheco, in the 8-9 turn could be a steal if he ends up becoming the 2-down back, and then McKinnon's only in on third down or obvious passing situations. And if Pacheco's a really good runner, really good athlete. I mean, if he can develop a passing game out of the backfield, catching game out of the backfield, he could be really good. Obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still there, so that is just kind of another question mark you have. Javonte, it's all injuries. I mean, if he wasn't injured last year, he would have been one of the top running backs. He would be a first or second round pick. So you're really just, until we know more about when he's going to come back, he's going to be super late in drafts. I don't mind the dart throw. Don't love the wide receiver or quarterbacks there. He had Brees, so another injured running back. Kenneth Walker, one that's going to be split in time. Isaiah Pacheco, one that's going to be split in time. And Javonte Williams off an injury. Oh, and this is the guy that went Debo. Don't love this guy's draft. He's also going super wide receiver heavy, and all of his running backs have somewhat of a question mark. He also went Kincaid, for his first tight end, which is fine if you have that much faith. But I got to say, this is probably one of my least favorite drafts right here. He does have superstar potential, which could potentially save him. But when you're building a team, I like Wan'Dale Robinson. Like the odds of Wan'Dale Robinson doing anything more than a backup running back you could have snagged is very slim. So even Van Jefferson you could put in the same light. Gerald Everett, Gerald Everett was only valuable when there were other people off of the field last year. So again, I know it's a late pick, but I just don't necessarily love that roster construction. So adding Javonte here, I'm not a big fan of. All right, looks like we're about halfway through. Where are we at on time? 14 minutes. Okay, I'm going to start buzzing through a little bit faster. I wanted to keep it closer to 20, so I'm going to buzz through some of these names. OBJ, again, you heard of me. I don't think he's going to be able to stay healthy. The fact Juju went after OBJ is just an absolute joke. For fantasy purposes, Juju is going to be way more productive than OBJ. He's going to be way healthier than OBJ. I would put $1,000 bet on it right now that Juju has more games played, more targets, more catches, more yards, and I'd even probably say more touchdowns than Odell Beckham Jr. So not a fan of that pickup. Rashad White, him going this far around these other names is pretty impressive. For to get him down here, I actually really like that. I think there's a good chance that he's the main guy in or Tampa Bay. Your only concern there is he just needs to he needs to save that job, and they're probably going to be a pretty bad team. They have a lot of offensive weapons, so I mean I think Baker can at least get something going down there. And if he can't, then we know Baker's obviously not that guy, which is the camp that I'm in. David Montgomery, I don't hate it. I mean, we saw how up and down Detroit was with running backs last year, specifically DeAndre Swift. So, I mean, there's a chance Montgomery gets a good amount of work. He got a decent contract. Seems like they're going to develop a strong run game. There's a chance he kind of folds into the Jamal Williams role. Maybe he's just a hammer guy on the goal line and ends up with a bunch of touchdowns. So, I don't mind it here. I would not want Montgomery to be one of my main guys, which is kind of where he is here. He must have went super wide receiver heavy. Oh, he went Kelsey, went wide receivers, went quarterback. So he missed probably a lot of really good options. Obviously, just snagging backups and potential guys that could take over or at least take over on any given week. Don't love that. I would much rather Montgomery to be like my third or fourth running back at this point. AR-15, he is what he is. Like I said, may have the worst passing season in NFL history. This might get clipped all over the internet. I might look like a fucking idiot, but I think that he has running upside unlike no other. My only problem is if you're getting Josh Allen, I would much rather snag like a Geno or Daniel Jones and then not just risk because if Josh Allen goes down and Anthony Richardson's only a mid-level QB for fantasy, that your team is shot at that point. Unless you're hoping that Cook, Taylor, Cup, all these guys have to go crazy for your quarterback room to work out. If anything happens to Allen, odds are Allen plays the entire season. He's really good for football and fantasy football again, and your team's fine because of that. Running back room's a little weak, though. So this pick, I mean, you could have grabbed a Penny, a P. Ryan, a Robinson, something like that, I think, to bolster up that running back room a little bit more important than AR-15, but that's this pick. Evan Ingram, I think at that point, I mean, coming off of last year, probably the next best available tight end. So don't blame you. He was great in that offense. He should be great. Only question is, does he get a contract? Does he have to play on the 1-year deal? And does that affect any of his stats? Rashad Penny, if something happens to Swift, I mean, there is a chance Penny becomes the number one guy in Philadelphia. So he is now, I do not have a problem snagging him later in drafts if you'd want to. Let's see what his running back room looks like. Bijan, Najee, Rashad Penny, Khalil Herbert. Again, another guy that I would much rather Rashad Penny be like my fourth running back, but at this point you kind of got to take who you think's going to play, which is exactly why I went Samaje Perine. I mean, I had Gibbs, Sanders, Connor, and then I went ahead and took Perine as my fourth running back, and Perine's probably starting as the Denver starting running back this year. We'll see when Javonte comes back, but it's not only Javonte has to come back. Javonte then has to get back into running back shape, get used to those hits again. There's a good chance Perine is the number one running back option for Denver for half the season. So getting him down here, I loved it. Yes, we're going through round 10. And then Daniel Jones, again, I think I already said I liked how this guy drafted. Yep, Dak and then Daniel Jones. If you're going to go late quarterback, get two of them. That each of them could have a good game any given week. I like that. Kamara, if you're taking Kamara, that's 100% on you. We're just it's just questionable on what's going to happen this year. I mean, if it's just a 6-game suspension, he comes back and becomes the Kamara of a couple of years ago, you're ecstatic. If he ends up missing 6 games, gets you 2 touchdowns, maybe right at 800 to 1,000 yards, you're not going to be happy with him. Again, trust me, as a guy who has Kamara in a dynasty league, he has almost no value when trying to get rid of him right now. And then my last pick here for this video, my 10th round pick, I went ahead and snagged Chig Okonkwo. At this point, I had no tight ends. I was pretty stacked on both my running backs and my wide receivers. I was happy with my quarterback room with Trevor Lawrence. I wanted to grab at least one guy I felt like had pretty big breakout potential at the tight end position, and that was good old Chig Okonkwo. Obviously, in Tennessee, I know DeAndre Hopkins met there, was it last week? So if they had him, Okonkwo maybe comes down just a little bit because they will have that elite pass-catching option. But, I mean, I think there's a good chance that between Burks and Okonkwo, they're really the number 1 and 2 pass-catching options. Okonkwo is an insane athlete. He just needs to develop a little bit more as a tight end. I think he can 100% do that. So for not having a tight end and needing to get one, I felt like could have a great year. To get him in the 10th round, I was ecstatic with. Russell Wilson, let's see what this guy's quarterback situations are looking like. Deshaun, Geno, Russell, I mean, hopefully you're stacked up on quarterbacks at that point. Honestly, not a terrible team. All right, actually, this guy he's a fan of specific teams: Cleveland, Denver, Baltimore, Cleveland, and a little bit of Seattle. Cleveland, I mean, basically Cleveland, Seattle, Denver must be this guy's three favorite teams this year, as he is just building a roster off of those three. Uh, don't necessarily mind it, but I mean, it's some of these you're reaching to get these kind of players, so that's never a smart way to draft. Jacoby Myers, don't mind him. He should take over what Hunter Renfro's role was. The only question is who's their quarterback and how often is Jacoby going to get targeted. See a little running back stretch here. Gibson, Harris, Charbonnet, Dillon. I think Gibson and Harris are two guys that could compete to be the number one guy on their team still. So to get them at the 10th round is nice. Charbonnet, he's the bigger running back out of the two. There's a chance he gets goal line opportunities and steals some touchdowns. So don't mind snagging him. AJ Dillon, let's hope for a turnaround year this year. Let's hope that he can get that, get his career back on track. Because I would say the past couple, last year, after 2 years ago, everyone was pretty excited about Dillon. Last year, I think he could be a major. After last year, I think he could be a major value in drafts. Alan Lazard, I get the Aaron Rodgers connection, but he was never anything that special in Green Bay. So if you think him going to New York with the Aaron Rodgers connection makes him fantasy valuable, then that is completely up to you. I probably am not taking Alan Lazard in any drafts this year. I would much rather have the guy right after him, Zay Jones. They're both probably the wide receiver 3 on their respective teams, but we saw last year Zay Jones does have breakout potential in any given week, whereas Alan Lazard, I don't like Aaron Rodgers also only threw more than 2 touchdowns, I think once or twice last year. So the odds of Alan Lazard getting those 2 or 2 out of 3 touchdowns in any given week is pretty slim in my opinion. So I would much rather have Zay Jones and probably a Tyler Boyd or something. I don't think that the Alan Lazards of the world are going to vastly jump. You have the same quarterback. It's going to be a relatively similar offensive system because even though, it was ran by LaFleur, Rodgers still had his part that was put into it. And then, he's going to have other new weapons. He has a Garrett Wilson. I believe Randall Cobb might be there at some point if he's not already. McCole Hardman's going to be there. He's going to be a Christian Watson speed kind of guy. So I think he could have a decent amount of value. And so, yeah, I'm not very high on Alan Lazard. I like Zay Jones, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers. I like both of those guys. Let's see, did either of them stack them with? They didn't stack them with their number one guy. Let's see, Jared Goff. Did you get anybody? Doesn't look like it. Aaron Rodgers. Did you get anybody? Doesn't look like it. So both these guys potentially stole a later round stack. I mean, I was potentially going to add one of these two guys if they would have fallen to my next pick just to stack them with my rounds 1 and 2 wide receivers. So I don't mind them at this point. Again, for fantasy, probably your next 2 best quarterbacks going off the board. Dalton Kincaid and then Sam Laporta. Wow, I don't think I've seen him go this early yet in drafts. Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff. Let's see, who's his tight end room? Absolutely hate that. I don't know. I don't know what tight ends are available instead of these two, but I think you got to grab a tight end. Maybe not above Elijah Moore, but I would say definitely above Odell Beckham. I mean, he did go early quarterback, so you don't want to go early quarterback and early tight end. But, I mean, there's just a chance on multiple weeks that his tight end room just gives him almost no points. And that's what you're looking at. And I realize I'm breaking into the 11th round. Should have ended it at Aaron Rodgers. So we're going to wrap up the video. If you hung around for these 25 minutes, appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, share on all the social media. Check out all the social media description below. Peace out, everybody.